Recording in progress. Today I'm here with something fun and something new. As many of you who have been following this work since its onset probably already know, video recording has never been possible before, because when I'm going into the crystal, the camera is right up on the crystal, and shifting over from photo mode to video mode enlarges the frame. So it takes the visible range and expands it out beyond what's, what can really come through. Instead of the being centered in the center of the frame or something along these lines, the eyes will be way out at the outside edges of the corner, so you can't really see. But this past week, Quinn is the being who comes through to me the most. The easiest, just all of the time. If I sit down with the crystal, Quinn is going to be there. And let's see, Quinn is right here. He comes through in just about every kind of format possible. But this week, he let me video record him. Everything stayed far enough to the back that when I clicked over to video, he was still visible in the frame. And so I have that to show you today. In fact, I'm delighted and thrilled and have joy bubbles going all through me about that, because now I can take you into the crystal with me and give you a bit of a view of what it's like when I go into the crystal. You won't see exactly what it is that I see when I'm having the experience, but you'll get an idea of how the beings appear and how they really are there. What more can I say about that? Just real quick before I say a few more things to just sort of explain. There were some questions that some of you had, and I'm going to abbreviate this video a bit and just sort of stay with the questions that were about modification of the frames to help you understand a little bit more. I wrote an article about this once. I will link that article in the description of this video for those who want to read that or go back and read it. But just to say briefly, inside the crystal, how do I say this? Inside the crystal is like a fractal geometry, and there's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And when I'm looking through these layers, I see them all, but only some are going to show up in a still frame. And usually I try to bring way to the front the main being who's presenting for everyone, just so everybody can get a good glimpse of our galactic and universal neighbors. So if you can imagine circles coming out of circles, coming out of circles, coming out of circles, all of the circles overlapping. And if you can imagine that these are faces overlapping, because they overlap, each face is going to share an eye. Okay, and so sometimes the beings come through, always the beings come through like this. But sometimes when I'm going to take the still shot, they'll come through and you have one half of the face as one being. And for all due purposes, the other half of the face, the other being. You have one eye that belongs to the one and one eye that belongs to the other. And so some of these you'll see. Here's Lars. I've just mirrored the one side of his face to the other side of his face to get Lars himself there rather than half and half. And I'll show you some of these examples. So as we go along this, I'm going to show you a few things. So first, I'm going to show you raw frames. Now, the raw frames can include a few different styles of renderings. So one is completely non-portrait. Okay, so this is not anything like we're seeing behind me here. It's just raw footage and somebody sticking his head out, as it were, amidst a lot of other mess, you know, lights and refractions of light and grayness and all of that kind of stuff. So they're not pretty, they're not portrait. That's one style of raw frame, and I'll give you an example here. The next style is, as you're seeing behind me, portrait style raw frames. These are frames I don't have to do anything with. They come through fully intact and either a portrait style or near portrait style, near enough to where I don't have to do anything to the frame whatsoever, except for maybe sharpen it up a bit, sometimes brighten it up a bit. And then the other one are stories, entire clusters of beings coming through, an entire story around a certain family set, if you will, of beings. And so all of this can come through and more. The next kind of frame that might come through is one, again, where you get the one eye of the one being and the one of the other. So it's all I really have to do is mirror the eye itself to the other side. I'm going to show you a collection of those frames here now. Another thing that might happen when the stories come through is the main being will be right out in front, but the rest of the story, it doesn't come through so pretty. It looks more like mess than anything else for all of you. I can still read the data, the details, the beings. But say I want to just show you the main being. I'm going to show you an example of one of those style frames here now. The next thing that can happen is I can get interference in the frame. And so maybe the light is coming through in a way that is making a flash, a big flash through a portion of the frame. Or perhaps there's a field in the crystal that the light is catching and causing some distortion in the frame. Or in some of the areas, we have clarity and not enough inclusions to block my actual fingers on the other side of the crystal. And so in part of the frame, what you're getting is my fingertip. And my fingertip is either in the way or just causing less of a a beautiful picture, the frame itself of the being. So I'll show you what I do when that happens and a selection of those frames here now. Now, before we get to the video, I just want to say a couple things about the video itself. Again, it's not going to be an experience of exactly what's happening with me when I go into the crystal and what I myself am seeing, because I'm able to see so many different layers through the light. And even in the video footage, those aren't necessarily going to come through for you because, again, my camera is right up on the crystal and everything is so close up that it only gives me very little wiggle room to navigate in there when I'm exploring through the crystal. It requires me oscillating the crystal and moving the camera and catching the light, you know, in certain geometrical ways in order for me to capture what I do. And I just don't have that wiggle room in the video footage. And so you'll see a bit of the wiggle room, but you won't see the being in its full light in the way that I'm actually seeing it live. But you will get to go into the crystal and you will get to see how Quinn and other beings manifest, that they really are there, that they're really being captured, and how it is they begin to appear. Okay, so I think that addressed a few of the questions about the frames and any alterations in the frames and various things that can happen when I go into the crystal, and how I bring these into full portrait style quality, at least some of them. Some of them, again, come through on their own, but others, rather than just throw away now, I will go ahead and bring to you so we can see the fullest array of beings that are coming through to us as possible. This, for me, is no longer really about the work in the sense of proving that it's happening. It's about the beings, it's about contact, and it's about meeting the beings, as many of them as we can. Okay, Isa is the main crystal I'm working with for the crystal contacts, the crystal transmissions, as I will often call them. Isa is a citrine quartz crystal. She's in a teardrop shape. Quartz crystal is six-sided. If I turn her upside down here, you can maybe see the six sides. She works really great with me. You can see she's just smaller than my hand. She's very easy for me to maneuver in my hand when I'm doing the captures, and she's just like glue. She just fits in there like a glove. However, you can use a small crystal, a much larger crystal. The size and shape of the crystal, even you can see she's full of inclusions. I mean, she's not super clear, although she has clarity in areas. She has lots of inclusions in others, and she features, as this question often gets asked, a large rainbow cluster right at her center, which is where a lot of the color in the frames comes from. Okay, so for me, the biggest part of the process is listening for the call. So when someone is calling me through this crystal, I can feel it. I will start to have the idea to pick up the crystal, that I need to start picking up the crystal, that I need to start working with the crystal. It'll just keep pushing itself more and more forward. And this is a very large part of my process. And once I do pick up the crystal, the first part of my process is to connect with Isa, to connect with the crystal itself. Okay, I want to not only shift my brainwave patterns wholly out of beta, I want to shift my brainwave patterns into the frequency match of the being that is calling. This is going to take me into a deep alpha, and as I begin working with the crystal, it's going to take me into the theta waves. And being able to function in the theta waves is not something that's easy. They, as you may know if you go out of body yourself, are very intoxicating. You may need to employ some things to keep you focused in the reality and on what you're attempting to do here, which is bring through a wave from another point in time to your wave here in this point in time through the mean of the crystal. Fascinating process, hard to wrap your mind around. I know that this is actually taking place, but let me say this: if you can do it with this, you can do it with this. The process of opening a window, I will mention right here now, is a process of triangulation. So if I'm wanting to go out beyond the body of this crystal itself, I am going to pick a point, and it's going to be a triangulated point. This face, and this face meet right here at this point. And I'm going to take the camera, or just my gaze, if I'm doing it just for myself, right into the point in this crystal. And windows are going to start to open. Fascinating, because I can actually see the windows open. And you can see the light change as you go in. The light waves, the sun beams are carrier waves, and they can carry information, carry data that can be processed through the crystal and sent to me, processed through the crystal, and received here on my end. Fascinating, right? Also, and I can go into this crystal, into the crystal itself. That's going to be going into the elemental realm. Okay, and the elemental realm, I can read this rock. There is a story in this stone, and I can capture those as well. The process and the work that we're doing with the crystal is so that we can take what is an invisible experience within myself and visibly show you. People in physical space often want something, some physical proof, some physical mean to understand what it is you're saying, and this is just something that we're doing to help that along. So each of the brain waves and the frequencies within each of the major brain waves has its own visual and visible spectrum. Okay, so when we're in the beta brainwave, we're principally seeing our 3D physical reality, and only our Earth-like 3D physical reality, not 3D physical reality anywhere else. So it's a lockdown sort of wave, which isolates you in a particular point of focus so that you can have a particular experience. And other elements of what exists right here while you're right here in this wave doesn't get through to you. Okay, and so when we shift into the alpha wave, this is a whole nother frequency pattern, a whole nother frequency wave. And there's data, there's information in this wave that isn't in the beta wave. And so you can see that as you shift your brainwave patterns into these other waves, this additional information is going to come through. And as it comes through to you, it can be focused through the crystal and captured with the camera for others to see. But it first requires you seeing it. Okay, and what's really happening is you're transferring the contents of what's in your own awareness, what's in your own visual field through the crystal and onto the camera. It's not just the being who's presenting in the frame. It is the frequency wave of that being. It is the frequency waves that I am emitting as I am getting the capture. And so all of those frequency waves are in there. Where these beings are is in there.